Hello, welcome to 5.04, The Government is a Consumer One. This is starting with slide 14, Pork Barrel Politics. It might look as though government spending decisions are rational economic choices. Sometimes they are, but sometimes they are more political than rational. Government spending involves many tough choices. These decisions can also serve the specific interests of those who support them. In a democracy, politicians are naturally drawn to spending decisions that please the people who elect them into office and can re-elect them term after term. Pushing for discretionary spending that pleases their constituents is often politically beneficial. Discretionary spending is a normal part of the budget-making process, but it can get out of control. Government spending ought to benefit the public as a whole. Spending for a special interest instead of the public interest is known as pork barrel spending. Pork barrel spending is usually targeted to win political support. It does not provide a benefit to anyone outside that particular group. Politicians routinely push for government spending on projects for their districts, with little or no benefit to people outside the area. This is generally seen as unfair because the costs of these projects are borne by all taxpayers, not just those who benefit. The term pork barrel spending originated in the 1800s. Pork was stored and shipped in barrels, and pork was slang for money, especially government money. Pork barrel bills were bills that politicians tried to get passed that were expensive or extravagant and usually benefited only a few people. Spending is the trend. In the 20th century, spending by governments throughout the world grew. The pattern of federal government spending in the United States reflects this general trend. Government spending stayed relatively consistent for nearly 150 years, with the exception of wartime periods. However, a steady rise began in the early 1950s and continues today. It should be noted that, since the economic crisis of 2008, government spending has decreased in many areas, especially on state and local levels. The overall upward trend reflects the fact that governments in general play a larger role in the lives of their citizens and in the functioning of national economies. There are several reasons for this trend. Population growth and migration to suburban areas since the 1950s has caused government spending to rise in order to build roads, sewer systems, schools, and provide various services. Population expansion gives governments more people to serve. A second factor is military spending. After World War II, military spending in the United States stayed relatively high, even during times of peace, as the country stayed ready for war. There are other factors as well, such as the growing number of retired people, increasing the need for public assistance, and the rising costs of new technologies for the military and other government agencies. Growing national debt. Governments generally cover most of their annual spending through taxation, but many governments today, including the U.S. government, operate with a budget deficit. When a government operates with a budget deficit, it must borrow money. This, of course, leads to debt that must be paid at a later time. It also involves interest payments on the borrowed money, which is a form of government spending that does not actually buy anything except the continuation of credit. When a government has a balanced budget or a budget surplus in a given year, it may still need to borrow to pay off debt from years past. This is the case not only in the United States, but also in many developing countries, where growing budget deficits have resulted in steadily increasing debt. While some people look at deficit spending as financially irresponsible, governments often choose to operate at a deficit. Most economists agree, however, that a government cannot operate on a deficit budget forever. Deficits and debt. Just like an individual, when the government borrows money, it must first find a lender. A government can borrow money from either internal or external sources. Internal sources include bonds held by citizens and money loaned by domestic banks. External sources include foreign governments or individuals or foreign-owned banks or businesses. The U.S. government, like other developed countries, borrows most of its money internally by issuing debt in the form of treasury bonds. Remember, when someone buys a treasury bond, they're loaning money to the government. This borrowing has a significant effect on the economy. When governments borrow, they gain access to large sums of money and they can spend more than they could otherwise. This can help encourage economic growth. Governments can keep operating as long as they continue to attract lenders and make interest payments on issued debt. But increasing government debt can negatively affect the overall economy. In order to make investing in government bonds enticing, the interest rates on these bonds have to be relatively high, although rates on government bonds are usually lower than those of more risky investments. Good rates may lead to rising bond sales for the government, but it cuts into sales of corporate bonds. As corporate investment declines with reduced corporate bond sales, the economy usually slows down. Continued borrowing has an effect on the government budget as well. As a government's interest payments grow, bigger portions of the budget must be dedicated to these interest payments, reducing the government's ability to finance other activities. A heavily indebted government may be unable to cope when need arises for large infusions of government spending into the economy. Government spending choices. As government spending and deficits keep growing, people feel the effects in the amount of taxes they have to pay to support government spending and debt repayment. Similarly, when the government slashes spending, as happens from time to time, taxes usually go down, but the availability of government-provided goods and services declines too. If spending cuts are targeted, only certain groups feel the cuts, but if spending cuts are across the board, everybody feels the loss in some way. People also feel it when the government spending priorities change. In the United States, discretionary spending has shrunk as mandatory spending has grown. When the government spends more on programs such as Social Security, Medicare, and welfare, recipients experience improved well-being even as taxpayers feel a greater burden. If the government decides to reduce spending in social programs, people who no longer receive these payments experience a decline in living standards, while taxpayers experience tax relief. Government spending is always a tough balancing act that has profound implications for all the players in the economy. Governments provide many goods to all of society, ranging from national defense to public parks, sewer systems, and road maintenance. Some of these goods are essential to the functioning of the government, while others meet the desires of the people. Public goods are almost always provided by the government at some level. Review the nature of public goods to see why the government is so heavily involved in providing them. You will find out how the government goes about making sure these goods are provided for society. You will also see how the government provides other goods and services that society desires. The public and private sectors. To understand public goods, it is important to first recognize the difference between the public sector and the private sector. The public sector is where the government operates, and the private sector is for everyone else. In a free market system, the idea that the government does as little as possible in a free market system, the idea is that the government does as little as possible, leaving the bulk of economic decisions up to private consumers and producers in the private sector. That does not mean the government does nothing, however. Even in a free market system, the government has important jobs to do. These take place in the public sector. The government and public goods. People often argue about the proper size and scope of the public and private sectors. Fundamentally, this comes down to an argument over the role of government and its responsibility to its citizens. There are, however, some public goods that nearly everyone agrees that the government should provide. National defense is an example of a public good that enjoys widespread agreement. Defense includes military forces, border protection forces, and police forces at all levels of government. What company could afford to provide all those services, and how would it profit? Public goods cannot be divided up and distributed through a market to individual consumers. Rather, they're available to everyone, and everyone benefits from them, whether they pay for them or not, whether they even want them or not. National defense is a public good because the military and police protect everyone throughout the country. Everyone benefits from defense and protection agencies. Reviewing public goods. Remember that public goods are both non-excludable and non-rival. Public goods are non-rival because people don't have to fight each other for them. Unlike individual goods, public goods can be enjoyed simultaneously by an unlimited number of consumers. One person using it does not diminish another person's use of it. Defense provides safety for all the people. Other public goods that have this same trait include streetlights, sidewalks, and clean water. The non-rival quality of public goods is a positive attribute because it means the good is evenly distributed. One problem with public goods is the fact that they are non-excludable. When a good is non-excludable, you cannot keep people from using it, whether they pay for it or not. Fire and police services are two examples of non-excludable goods. Because of this, public goods have a free rider problem. If a good cannot be withheld from people who don't pay for it, providers know they cannot sell it, and therefore they will not produce it. Private producers do not usually get involved in selling public goods because of this problem, because they are only interested in producing goods that can be sold for a profit. The government steps in to solve the free rider problem by forcing people to pay taxes that are used to provide the good. Because taxes are not voluntary, government-funded goods don't have the free rider problem. Merit goods. Governments provide many public goods, but citizens often demand other things from their government. The government can respond to these demands by providing merit goods. Merit goods are goods that benefit both individuals and the general public. They are excludable, unlike public goods, but their benefits extend beyond paying customers. People can be excluded from enjoying the direct benefits of merit goods, but not the indirect benefits. Education can be a public or a private good, but above all, it is an example of a merit good. Students benefit from the knowledge and skills acquired in school, but the rest of society also benefits from the abilities these students bring into the economy and the overall society. Even people without children benefit from schools, since those students will someday drive the economy and lead the country. Privatized education is excludable, which enables private producers to make a profit selling education to certain members of society. But there is a clear demand for education among the rest of society, including many people who cannot afford private schools. Thus, education must also be a public good. If left to the private sector alone, education would not be available to anyone who needs it. The argument for public education is a good example of why many people want the government to provide certain merit goods. Even without free public schools, there would still be private schools for those who could afford them. But that would still not provide education for everyone, and many students would be shut out of the opportunity to learn under such a system. Public education widens access to knowledge, raising the education level of society as a whole, which is beneficial to the entire public. This is why governments typically provide the merit goods of education. And this ends this recording. We're stopping at slide 24. The next one will pick up at slide 25. Please let me know if you have any questions or concerns about the information. Have a great day.